So welcome, Jim, to this long distance interview in times of coronavirus. I suppose we're trapped in our own houses, so it's a good opportunity to learn a little bit about your life in music. And so I guess I'd like to start by asking how you first got into music, how you learned the craft.
Well, it's a long story. Don't forget, it's a very long story because I turned 80 in March. But I was seven. I grew up in a working class family in Leighton Buzzard, and we had a piano at home. Nobody played it, but my mum thought I should go for piano lessons. I went to the old guy for about 5 years and thought I was doing quite well. But he died. And then I went to somebody else, and he auditioned me and I was going to be his last student. And he didn't like my playing very much. Took me back to basics. He himself was a student of Tobias Mate, who's one of the great pedagogues of the between the two wars. He taught people like Myra Hess, Clifford Curzon. So my teacher was one of those, and so I learned the rudiments of piano from him. And it wasn't about just playing the piano and pressing the notes. It was about getting a great sound and articulation. It was much more important than learning to memorize mountains of stuff. I've never really learned to memorize at all. I can sight read very well, and I can play almost anything I like. So that's the secret there. And then later I studied the organ and became an organist. My first job was as a church organist, a first professional job. And I was offered £12 a year to this small church outside the town where I lived. And then after the first week, they thought I was good enough. They doubled it to 24. So I guess you could call that professional job. But then I did classical stuff. And then I found that I could play anything by ear. And when I became a university student, I thought to myself, well, I don't want to spend summers working on building sites and the like. So I followed up an advert in the Melody Maker and got myself an agent. It happened to be George Formby's agent. You may have read that in my bio. And I got up to my first holiday camp job. And then another year later, I got another one. And he got me more work. And I never really had to work with my hands again after that. And so that's how I got started.
But music isn't everything that you do in life, is it? You have another career also.
I have 2 doctorates in physics. So, that tells you something about what the rest of my life, which I don't do anymore. I retired over 10 years ago.
But that job has taken you around the world also, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. I've visited most places. Never been to mainland China, and I never will now, I guess. But I've traveled widely, yeah. I was a scientist in, big fish in a small pond. You know how it is in academia. So I've published a lot of papers and books and things in that field, but I don't have any, I don't even have a scientific book in my house anymore. I've got rid of all of it. I don't even think that way. I'm a music.
And it was science that then took you to Scotland, I take it.
I'm sorry?
Was it science that took you to Scotland?
Oh, yeah. Because I've been living in New Jersey for 5 years, and then there were the race riots in '68. We were here then. My wife, late wife, Christine, she said, we had one son at the time. She said, I don't want to bring up my son in a country where they have armed guards in the school. And so I thought, better start looking. And how I got the job at Strathclyde was interesting because I applied for the job. They called me for an interview. I couldn't make the interview, but they gave me the job anyway. And I accepted it. And at the point I arrived, my first day on the job, they'd never seen me and I'd never seen them. Weird, eh?
Wow.
Yeah, it is weird. I became a lowly lecturer and taught there. And then I got an offer to go to the Institute in Edinburgh to head up a research group. And things went, and that moved me into the area of occupational and environmental health. That's how I made that transition from physics into what I ended up doing.
And then how did you hook in with the jazz scene then in Scotland?
I beg your pardon?
How did you hook up with the jazz scene in Scotland then?
Oh, that's an interesting story too, because I was at University of Durham way back in the early '60s. And one of the guys I met there was somebody called John Davis. I hope he's sort of on your list of names that you kind of know or remember. And John Davis was playing in a band that Bill led called Head. Now, it was an old friend of John's, and we just happened to he happened to notice I'd arrived at the university, and probably in some notice circulated within the university about new arrival. And he called me one day, went had lunch, and we rekindled our relationship. But so I met all the guys in Head fairly early on when I went to hear the band. But I had no aspirations at the beginning to get into the jazz scene. It takes a while, you know. People, you don't just walk into a city and start playing jazz. You just don't do that. And so I bided my time for quite a while. And then, but John had introduced me to these guys. So I knew Bill quite early on. I'd met the others, but Bill mainly. And then out of the blue, I got a call one night from Bill inviting me and my wife to have dinner with him and his then wife, Elspeth. And it was kind of a bit stunned, really, and he just wanted to say hello. So we had a nice evening with them. And then it wasn't long after that he asked me around. Bill was did you know Bill well? I think he did. Quite sardonic. He said, when he came on the phone, he would say, Jim, as if to say, and that's all he'd get. So I say, yeah, no, what's up? And he'd say, and then the next time I got a call, he said, would you like to come around for what he called a knock? I'd like to come over for a knock. I never heard that term before. And so I go over there and I find a bunch of guys, including John Davis. And I didn't know Cruikshank very well. He was there. Ronnie Ray was there, and Bill. And we played a few songs, just a bit jam session. But I didn't realize I was being auditioned. I didn't realize at the time. I soon caught on. He had a nice piano in his flat. He had a Steinway. It belonged to his wife, actually. And then next thing I know, he's got a gig. And the first gig was at Air Jazz Club on a winter night. It was the coldest bloody night of the year. And so that was a quintet back then. And then Bill got gigs around Edinburgh for this lineup. I think Bill, after playing with Head for so long, was keen to move into the modern jazz area, you know, what we call classic jazz over here. I don't know what you call it in Britain. But, you know, hard bop, call it what you like. And so this was his way to break in. And he even went so far, this is typical Bill, went so far as to buy a piano for the band and install it in a venue. And then when the venue changed, he'd move the piano. At that point, I was just playing steam piano. I hadn't got a Fender at that point. So the piano was built, it was Bill's piano. He had it, he maintained it, I played it. We had several gigs at the beginning with the quintet, several residencies. I can remember a couple of pubs, back to back, down somewhere near Argyle Street. I could never find it. And there's a bunch of guys at the art college. They were really sort of built the audiences up, and I think Bill cultivated them quite well. And that went on for quite a while, and I'm lose track of time a little bit. I think that was probably a couple of years, maybe less. I'm not too sure of the dates. Other folks might be able to fill in. But then he brought Brian Keddy in, and I'd never met Brian before, and the band became a sextet. And well, I guess the rest is history with that, because that band was quite active, was active for 2 or 3 years before it dried up. You know, all good things come to an end. But it was a pretty good band.
I mean, that's my abiding memory of Bill, is that he was always so welcoming to young players and to outsiders, to new kids in town, you know.
Well, if it wasn't for Bill, I wouldn't have got in the Scottish jazz scene. You know, you don't just go and walk in and sort of say, can I sit in? You just don't do that. I mean, there was a time when I was young, I'd go and ask for a sit in and usually get told this off. But this is going to be edited out, if I swear. But Bill was very, very good. I wouldn't have got in if it wasn't for Bill. And of course, John Davis started it. And of course, none of these guys are with us anymore.
No.
So.
And did you play with other people in Scotland while you were here, or were you kind of wedded to that band? Or?
I mean, there was a sextet, and then I played around Glasgow. That was about it because we were very busy. The band was very busy at that time. But then when I moved to Edinburgh, I played with some of the other guys. I'd get called to play with various people, and I'd take all sorts of gigs, and for quite a long time, because I was always afraid if I said no, they'd stop calling me. You didn't want it to dry up. And I loved doing it. My wife was very tolerant. She encouraged it all. The sextet ended, I think, around about 1980 or 81. I'm really a bit hazy about the dates. That was a bit weird too, because we'd been doing a gig in Edinburgh, in Glasgow. And I was the chauffeur for Gordon and Brian, because they both lived in Edinburgh. I'd bring them back, dropped off Gordon. Then I went to, and Brian lived, would you believe, on West Montgomery Street. W Montgomery Street, which was pretty neat for a place like that. And he sat in the car for a minute when I got him to outside his flat. And he said, well, I guess I'll be seeing you. And that was the end of that. It just died a natural death. There were no real serious fallouts, but I think we were getting towards the end, maybe getting a bit scratchy. You know, sometimes we didn't always agree, and I didn't always see eye to eye with Gordon Cruikshank, a terrific player. But he and I didn't see eye to eye because he made a living out of music, and I didn't. I was a sort of a dilettante, to be quite frank. And so was John Davis, and so then was Bill. I mean, Bill worked for IBM all the time I knew him. And then I think he left. I'm not sure how that ended, but.
Yeah, I mean that's always been a thing in jazz, hasn't it? The people who make their living from it, and those who don't. And I mean, Gordon Cruikshank was famous for being quite a prickly character at the best of times.
Yeah, he was. I think he thought. Well, yeah, the story. I mean, I had to leave him behind one night in Glasgow after a gig, so I had to go to work the next day. I couldn't get him out of the bar. He was really pissed off about that, and Bill was trying to kind of mend it, but it never really got going after that. But, yeah, it's. I mean, there's the thing. You look at the professional scene in Britain. Art Thiemann always had a wonderful career. I mean, Gwilym told me a story about Art. He said, "You always know when Art's playing at a club because you see his Ferrari outside." Because Art was, Art Thiemann was a very well-regarded orthopedic surgeon.
Yeah.
And so he did it as a sideline too. But the guys that do, I've just read, for my birthday, one of my boys bought me the biography of Stan Tracy. And I was a big admirer of Stan Tracy for a long time. And I think that's why Bill wanted me on board, because back then, I don't do it, I would introduce some of those elements, those monkish type things. But they gave me the biography that Clark Tracy had written about his dad. And most of his life, he never made any money. He was poverty-stricken nearly all the time. I don't think he was getting union rate in Ronnie Scott's club. I don't know, maybe he did, but I'm not sure. It was really hard up.
I mean, that's a common story for a lot of that generation, I think. I mean, it's the same with Keith Tippett. I remember him telling me that he would have to supplement his income by picking potatoes for the local farmer, and that was in his 60s.
Or doing commercial gigs, just what Kenny Wheeler did. I mean, Kenny did a lot of session work. And I think most of the others do session work. Let's take someone like Don Rendell, who was a god in a way for saxophone players from his generation. I wonder, I wonder if he was the top-rated saxophonist for a long time. Did he make money out of that? I doubt it.
Yeah, I doubt it too, actually. And so when things. Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask. So when things came to a head, as it were, with Head, when it fizzled out, was that the end of your playing stint in Scotland, or did you go on to do other projects?
No, I played with other guys, and I actually George Lyle was the bass player of the sextet, because Ronnie, I don't know, but George was based in Glasgow, and I don't know whether you knew George at all, but he was a wonderful guy actually. He and I were really great friends. And he had more background in free jazz. In fact, I played with him and Trevor Watts together. That was interesting. But then I met Alan Pendrick, who was he was a really interesting guy, fabulous artist. I've got paintings of his hanging on the wall up there behind me. I don't know whether you can see. And we were the best of friends. And we started playing together as a trio with Ronnie Dunn from you know Ronnie. These guys, they're all dead now. It's such a sad thing. Ronnie was a wonderful bass player too. But Alan and I started doing the drum piano duo of free improvisation. I started going to music clubs and non-jazz sort of events, and just making stuff up. You know, as you know, no idea what you're going to sit down to play, and you just start making noises. And you're into free jazz too, are you?
I am, and I'm kind of interested to hear how it was back then, because the free thing hasn't really ever been a thing in Scotland. A little bit more in Glasgow, maybe, with the Glasgow Improvisers.
Well, Tom McGrath, of course, was the centerpiece for all that, because he played the piano as well as write poems and plays. And in fact, the first time I heard Tom McGrath was, I think George was on bass with him. I didn't know George then. But it was at the university, some event, lunchtime event. And he got so excited at one point, he's not playing an upright piano. And he started banging on the top of the piano saying, help, help, help. And it's like a performance art mingled with music. You know, it's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Did you know Lindsay Cooper as well? The bass player?
I didn't know Lindsay. George talked about him a lot.
He was internationally famous as a free player. And I mean, you know, free jazz has always been a difficult one to make a living out of, and I suppose that's maybe that's what's put a lot of people off. But well, that's fascinating. I got into a taxi recently, before the lockdown, that is, and I got chatting to the cab driver, and he said, "Oh, you know, so what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm working on this project, the Scottish Jazz Archive." And he goes, "Oh, did you know my uncle, Alan Pendrick?" And I was like, "You're joking." So
Alan Pendrick?
Yes. And so his daughter got in touch with me, and she's got a whole bunch of stuff that she wants to hand over to the archive, which is lovely.
Wow, is that something?
Yeah.
Is this funded by the Scottish Arts Council or something? This project?
No, we're currently not funded by anyone. It's a bit of a labour of love at the moment, but we're looking at ways to fund it.
Wow, I mean, the Arts Council should get behind it. Bill had ways of getting money out of the Scottish Arts Council. I mean, that Shetland tour, which I wrote about, did you? I don't know whether you spotted that.
Yeah.
In your speed read, but I mean, Bill arranged a jazz tour of Shetland, 5 concerts in the space of a week. I mean, Shetland. Of course, they've got Ronnie Matheson came from Shetland, the bass player, and because he's a god up there. But I couldn't imagine taking a sextet up there. I mean, it was weird, a little weird actually.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, he was a resourceful man.
Bill, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether he made money out of the jazz bar. I mean, I think that was probably a labour of love, wasn't it?
That was my understanding. I interviewed him when he was still alive, obviously. And he said basically that, yes, it's a labour of love. There's no money to be made from it, but he, you know, he managed to balance what his activities there to make it work. You know.
Was Bill living in Edinburgh by this time?
Yeah.
Because because I met a lady late on in the life of this sextet called Marianne, and I don't know whether that became his wife later on. I've no idea. But I didn't really lose touch with Bill, but we weren't in regular contact. But it was Bill that would write to me occasionally, would send me a recording. He sent me the recording of the concert we did with Jim Mullen, which is the BBC recording. And then he sent me some other stuff. And then he called me he sent me an email to tell me that George had died. Wasn't long after that Alistair Morrow sent me an email to say that Bill had died. Really shocked. I mean,
yeah.
Bill was younger than me. I mean, he would have been, what, 73 or 4?
I think 72 only, actually. Yeah, very tragic. I mean, the funeral was something to behold. Every jazz musician in Scotland was there.
Bill wasn't overweight or anything like that. Was he? As far as I know. I mean, no health issues. I was really sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I went straight to the piano when I heard that. And I've got this little recording device. the H4 of Zoom, you know the one?
Yeah.
You probably use these things. And it's really pretty good. And I know I've got it sitting inside the piano at the back, and I've got it, and I just sat down and recorded it. And I was quite pleased with it. I've actually I've transcribed it. If you're interested in the score, I can send it to you.
I'd love to see that.
For the guitar, if you like.
Absolutely. I mean, I was thinking, you know, to finish off the interview, it might be nice to hear a little something on the piano. I don't know how well it'll come across on Zoom, but
Well, I mean, I haven't thought of anything. Let me just sort of sit down.
that'd be lovely. Yes, absolutely. That's perfect.
You should hear the piano. This piano is a 1994 Steinway Model D. I never dreamed in a million years I would end up with a piano like this. I got a big room with a high 20-foot vaulted ceiling, and we have a lot of piano recitals in here. Not necessarily me. I have a lot of classical music friends. We've had as many as 50 people in this room for these recitals, and everybody agrees this is one of the best Steinways they've ever played. And it came about because my late wife was in long-term care for 5 years before she died, and I hadn't been claiming any tax relief on it. And then I suddenly got all this money in my hand as tax relief, and this piano came along just at that time. So I'm not going to do a recital.
No.
Just so you can hear the piano.
Lovely.